Welcome back to Rewitched, a charmed 1998 rewatch journey. I'm your host, Jess Sabanko, and I can't wait to share my thoughts on one of my favorite shows with you. Though episodes are now shorter, I will still be keeping them spoiler-free and welcome fans, new and old, to join me on my journey here and on social media at Rewitched_pod on Instagram and TikTok. Currently, I'm on season 5. So this week we have season 5, episode 5, which is in tights. In this one, we have two innocents, Kevin and Remus, who turn out to have a connection to each other by the end, and our villain of the week, who is Arnon. Before I get into the sisters, I'll do a little bit with these three. So with Remus, he is an elder who's about to retire. We see that he's very into, it seems like, destiny and just letting things happen the way they're supposed to. We find out that he is able to see the future, great power, things like that, and also things coming against him specifically. We also see that he does not have other powers, like he can't orb, which I wonder if that'll be a consistent thing for elders, because he kind of is your charges should know that elders' powers are mental, not physical, which, okay. Then we have him kind of being really snippy towards Leo. He's kind of bratty. He's very controlling, but at the same time, he's a dick, but I don't know. I'm kind of into it. I think he's really funny and entertaining throughout the episode, even though he does have this bad attitude, which I think Piper really kind of interacts with really well. Whereas everyone else is kind of you're an elder, and they're more trying to be respectful and a little bit nervous towards him and kind of kiss assy, especially Leo. But we do see him and Piper have some interactions where Piper kind of calls this out and is I don't care about your rules. You should know that I take pride in breaking them. And they actually have a discussion where he mentions that not all the elders were interested in blocking her and Leo from getting married, and that some of them, like him, foresaw the baby she would be carrying. And she wants to ask more questions about this, but they get interrupted. And then later on, even though he's very pushing the rules, oh, it has to be you guys that protects me, not Leo, that's what the rules are, whatever. He doesn't give a fuck about the rules anymore by the end, because he's literally to Leo, ask me a question, I'm about to retire, I don't care, just what do you want to know? And Leo asks if the baby's gonna be healthy, and he says yes, and more powerful than you can ever imagine. So we got a lot to look forward to with their daughter here. She's gonna be super fucking powerful. In terms of his overall arc, obviously we have the aggressor and Arnon coming after him. With Arnon and Kevin, so what their connection is we find out that Kevin is a witch who's apparently 13 years old, but he did not look 13 to me. When they said that at the end of the episode, I was this kid is 15, 16, maybe even 17 or 18. But definitely not middle schooler. Especially since the guys he's interacting with, those are grown adults. Kaz and his little bodyguard or whatever. I'm those men are 25, so why are they bullying a middle schooler? Confusing. But whatever. So Kevin is dealing with bullying and other things going on. He's having a hard time, but he has this power that we later find out is called thought projection, where the things he draws can come to life. And Arnon is a demon who only has the power to sense other powers. He doesn't have any active powers himself, so he wants to use Kevin and his power in order to take Remus's power. And at first he tries to tell Kevin that Remus is evil, but obviously Kevin eventually finds out this is bullshit and doesn't really want to help Arnon, but Arnon is threatening him and his family and all these types of things. So taking advantage of this young child who does draw what is called the aggressor, who's a superhero, who's invincible, that he transforms into. First, the aggressor kills Kaz, which is really bad, and then Kevin doesn't want to draw anymore because, he feels bad about that. And Arnon is no, we have to go after Remus. Remus really accepts destiny. We see that each time he's about to be attacked, when he knows his death is coming, he's it's fine, this is what's meant to happen. We can't change that, right? He's very set on this is how things are supposed to be, which is interesting and does make sense as an elder. And I really like that about his character. He kind of just accepts his fate, but he's still kind of sassy and fun throughout. In terms of the sisters and their storylines and how they connect to all of this, So with Paige has two storylines. One, the main storyline where they're helping Ramus and Kevin, and her side storyline where she started seeing this guy named Dave, who they've been dating for about 3 weeks. At the beginning of the episode, Piper and Leo are checking out this other club in town because Piper's really wanting to make P3 better and wondering why people are going to this place instead. And she, of course, runs into Paige and her date there, and then Phoebe. And it turns out that they were all there without her, and Piper brings up how, like, she feels really left out, and, like, she doesn't know if she's more upset that they're at this club instead of her club, or that, like, they didn't invite her to come. And they're like, oh, like, we didn't think you'd want to come, you know, with the baby and everything. And she's like, yeah, but, like, sometimes the mommy needs to get out. And they're like, oh, like, did you want to come? And she's like, no, not really. Which, as someone with a chronic illness, like, so relatable. Like, no, I don't really want to go to this place, right? But, like, I did want to be invited. So, like, ask me so I can say no, maybe. But no, I really liked that scene, and it was a really great sister moment. She later in the episode reveals that this is the first person other than Glenn that she's seen since she found out she was a witch, and she is struggling sexually in this episode with being able to, like, concentrate as we had in season 3 with Piper, which is why I think the conversations between her and Piper throughout the episode are really effective and, like, really impactful for me, because I'm like, Piper's had this struggle before too as, like, a magic issue. Though obviously it was different because hers had more to do with the elders. But in this case, Paige is really worried about one day having to reveal the truth about being a witch to Dave. And this is kind of giving her a lot of, like, anxiety, inability to, like, you know, focus and everything. So she's having a hard time there. And her and Piper have this really great conversation where Piper's like, well, like, are you going to marry this guy? If not, like, worry about it when you get there, right? And Paige does end up accepting this by the end of the episode, which I think is really good, because I think that this is a really interesting storyline for her and something that makes sense for her character to be, like, questioning, because obviously Piper and Phoebe are both in situations where they didn't have to do this, like, big reveal of, like, I'm a witch, right? Because both their partners are magical as well. So Paige kind of worrying about her own future and where things can go. And this brings me back to 2 episodes ago when I was like, oh, like, is Paige gonna get a love interest now? You know what I mean? In terms of Piper, like I said, she's being kind of left out of things by her sisters and Leo, which we find out is Phoebe's idea because she doesn't want Piper to stress, which I think going back to what Piper was going through earlier in the season does make sense. But it's also like, are you just, like, coddling her too much because she's pregnant, which Piper has also pointed out multiple times she doesn't like having done to her, right? So there is that whole struggle, and we do see that she is in this episode really focused on getting P3 back to what it used to be. By the end of the episode, it is there, right? It is the #1 spot in town, but she also does realize that, like, it's not her #1 priority anymore. Like, her baby is her #1 priority. Like, yes, she still wants P3 to be successful. Yes, she still wants to be a badass witch, but, like, her daughter comes first, which I think is really cute and really well done, the way they have her kind of, like, go through the motions with that throughout the episode. In terms of Phoebe's storyline this episode, so we open up finding out that she's very overwhelmed at work. She's receiving a shit ton of letters and having a harder time getting to all of them. Then we have Cole show up, who wants her to help him with this slum lord, Miller, who is evicting tenants, and a bunch of people are going to be homeless by the end of the night if they don't do something. He recommends her using, like, the newspaper to help expose him. And Cole brings up that he's not using his powers anymore because ever since he tried to kill Phoebe last episode, like, he just wants to avoid that, avoid going to a dark place by doing that. However, that doesn't last the whole episode. But before anything with that, Phoebe does go over to Miller, and he's such a fucking dick. He unresponsive, doesn't care that she's going to put it in the newspaper, claims he's going to sue her, like, all this stuff. And then just as he leaves, she transforms into a superhero because Kevin has drawn the sisters as superheroes after their first battle with the aggressor so that they can defeat him next time they fight. And she uses this power to dangle Miller over the roof and try to convince him that, like, you know, he should get rid of the cockroaches, let all the tenants stay there. And he agrees to all of it. But while she's doing this, Cole shows up and is like, Phoebe, like, what are you doing? Like, exposure, like, what the fuck? And as a superhero, she doesn't care. We find out that the masks that they're wearing cloud their judgment. and keep them from thinking clearly. But anyway, she ends up bringing him back up, and he realizes by the way they speak to each other that they're husband and wife, so he asks for information about Cole Turner's wife, and things progress from there. Later on in the episode, when they're going with Kevin to go find Arnon, we see that he records Phoebe and the sisters dressed in their little like superhero costumes, still speed running away. Paige and Piper also turn into superheroes and save this woman who's being attacked on the street. And then when they all get home, again, they take off their masks. They find out that like it's clouding their judgment. That's when the aggressor shows back up. They do kill him in the fight. But after he gets stabbed through the chest, he turns back into Kevin. They call Leo to heal him. They have this long conversation. They find out about Arnon. And that's when they decide to help him. Of course, when they get there, Arnon finds out that Kevin can draw powers for other people, wants it to be done for him. By the time the sisters come in, that's already happened. He rips up the picture of them. They turn back to normal. There's this big fight at the end where they get back to the manor, and just after Arnon has killed Ramus and now has his power of foresight, he finds out that the Charmed Ones are obviously going to kill him. So Paige calls for his boot, rips up the drawing, Piper blows him up, and then we see his powers go into Kevin. So everything happened exactly how it was meant to be, which is a really sweet, like, kind of full circle moment, connecting the two characters, kind of giving this young witch who's struggling with something this new great power and destiny, which makes me wonder, like, are all elders then witches? Which I think is something we could kind of reflect on later on, or like if this happens a different way, different times. But whatever, he turns into the next elder. It's a really cute moment for all of them. And they say, you know, like, you won't have to worry about people picking on you anymore because now he has this great power. Then we do get to the end of Phoebe and Cole's storyline for the episode where, of course, Miller reveals to Cole that he has this video of Phoebe, and we get this really gross moment where he's like trying to blackmail Cole for $50,000 a month and is again saying how like if they don't have that kind of money, like they could dress up in their little outfits and make it. So this is the second time this season we've got like implications of like women's bodies being sold, which is not my favorite thing, but yuck. Cole obviously does not like this. He's like, well, I have my own powers. Like, I'm trying really hard not to use them because I don't like what they do to me. And Miller's kind of like, oh, whatever, like, guy, like, I don't give a fuck. And so as he's starting to walk away, what does Cole do? He uses pyrokinesis, burns him to death. Bye-bye, Miller. That's when Phoebe walks in and she's like, oh, like, you called, you said he was here, like, where is he? And Cole says, oh, like, I took care of it. And Phoebe's like immediately freaked out. She's like, what does that mean? And like runs away. And he's like, he was gonna expose you. Like, what was I supposed to do? And it is this really heartbreaking moment because I think in the last two episodes, we have seen Phoebe giving a little bit more leeway to Cole and accepting that like maybe he is trying to be good. We saw it last episode. We see it again in this episode where like after he says that he's not going to use his powers, even though she's totally off track with them ever getting back together, she does seem to be like giving him a chance to maybe prove that he can be good, that he can be helpful, right? But for her, this moment just proved exactly what she thought. He's never going to change, right? He killed Miller, so that's obviously evil. And she's upset about it, and understandably. Like, I get her reaction, but I also do feel bad for Cole because he did it to protect her, right? Which, is that the right way to protect her? No. The sisters would never choose to kill someone in order to not risk exposure. But Cole, again, one of those things that in my head proves that he's never going to be fully good. That's what he would do. Anyway, all of this wraps up with the sisters mostly in a decent place, Cole and Phoebe in not so great a place. But I really enjoyed this episode. I thought it was so fun. I think that all of the sisters' storylines totally made sense, and it just makes me excited to see what's happening next. I mean, Piper and Leo, I think, are in a pretty good place, learning out this really cool stuff about how powerful the baby's gonna be. We have Paige in this new love interest storyline. I doubt we'll ever see Dave again, but if we do, I will be pleasantly surprised. And then we do have, of course, Phoebe and Cole back in not so great a space. So we'll see what happens next.